easy how to paint aspens in watercolor is a Nana's favorite. Hi, I'm Shelley Carlson, Nana, and I'm really glad you're here. I made a step-by-step tutorial of how to paint aspen trees. And the picture is very special to me because I took it when we were on a hike as a family in Colorado for Papa's and my 40th anniversary. I wanted to share it with you. If you get behind on a step or need a little more time, make sure to just pause the video. That's just great. I want you to learn more about how to do some watercolor, and in particular, how to do a watercolor wash. I'll show you how. Just follow along with me. So let's go have some fun. A good place to start is to gather our supplies. You need something to cover the table in case paint gets on it, and I recommend watercolor paper because it just holds that water and doesn't disintegrate. Like typing paper will just frustrate you. We're going to be using Prang watercolor paints, and I recommend Prang because they have a good amount of pigment in them so that they are more vivid colors than some of the other brands. You'll need a pencil in order to make your drawing on your paper that we'll do, and paint brushes, of course, for your paint, and the markers are fine line permanent markers. They're Sharpies in this case, and we'll go over our drawings with that. Paper towels will sop up that extra water sometimes or wipe things off that you need, and of course you do need some water. And I don't know why I didn't get a clean glass. I'd already been doing a little bit of painting already. And the picture is of the aspen trees, so there are all the supplies that I'll be using. So when we prep our paper, oh, look at that little drawing from my son. He's 30-some years old now. What does that tell you? I tore a piece out from my notebook, and I'm going to make this into cards for people. So I'm going to fold that in half and cut it to a size that's good for putting in an envelope. And what I'll be working on then for the rest of the painting is going to be this piece of paper, and it's already cut in half. But you could also do a flat piece of paper and make a small painting for a frame. So you could make it 4x6 or 5x7, even 8x10. But if you make it larger, remember you're going to be enlarging everything that we do on this tutorial. So there you can see I'm going to be making several cards, and some of them are going to go to my kids as thank you for the trip that we took for our anniversary. Okay, so here's the card that I'm going to be working on, the piece of paper, the watercolor paper, and this is what it's going to look like when we're done. So you can see the colors in the background, and what I used for that one was from my paint palette, which is tubed watercolor paints that I put in this palette, and I use mostly those blues, greens, yellows, and a little bit of oranges there on the end, a little bit of brown. But in this case, we're going to be using the Prang watercolor because that's what most people have on hand. So that's what I'll be using. Now, it's a little bit limited in its color palette, but that's okay. We're going to do a little bit of mixing, and that's what we do in that little tray part. The lid part is actually a tray for mixing paint. Isn't that cool? So if you notice, the trees go the entire top to bottom of the paper. And I don't know if that made sense or not, but they go from the top of the paper to the bottom of the paper. So we're going to draw those lines from the top to the bottom, and each tree has 2 lines, of course, on either side. But if you notice, that center one is going to be behind the slanted one. So that line only goes part way down, and these lines are not going to be straight. The tree trunk isn't exactly straight, so you get to actually be rewarded here for drawing crooked lines. But again, it's 2 lines for each of those trees, and you can see the last one that I'm drawing here is kind of bent a little bit, and it's more narrow. Okay, so you've got one that's slanted in the middle. Oh, and I'm drawing that little branch that comes off of that, and it goes behind that slanted tree. And I'm going to draw that little branch or little tiny twig tree there. Now, if you're happy with the lines that you've drawn, you're going to go over them with that fine line Sharpie. If you aren't happy with those lines, you can stop And you can go back and do a little bit of erasing and change your lines a little bit. Mine go pretty fast because I've done this several times. So again, I want to remind you, stop the video at any point and do your drawing. And finish up your step and then come back and turn the video back on. So I'm going over all of those lines in marker, and at some points in time I'm speeding my video up just a little bit because it doesn't take quite so long. So that's happening right now. I'm going a little bit faster there, twice as fast in the video. Okay, now we're going to look at those trees. Do you see the little lines that are going from side to side on the tree? We're going to go and just make a few of those little lines. You don't want all the lines to look exactly the same. Some of them are just partway through and the tree from side to side, and two at a time, or one's a bit wider. So just make them various shapes and sizes. And I made that little knot on the tree, which is like a long squiggly oval with another squiggly little oval inside of it. And I'm going ahead and putting on a few of those words that were scratched into the tree. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I did because most of the trees did have that on it. I want to tell you that's not right to do, to scrape into the trees, but I went ahead and put that on there. And one of them said Mom, actually, so I made sure to get that in there. So I even put them in a little bit different spots on there. Drew some more lines. And again, this is sped up just a little bit right here as I finish up doing the drawing on the tree. So you're not expected to go that fast. Stop the video at any time and finish up your step. All right, so that's all of our drawing, and because it's permanent marker, we're going to be able to paint over this without it smearing at all. So that's pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to put the marker away. And now we're going to start our painting part. And this is going to take a while because we're going to do this background part in between the trees before we do the tree trunks. So we are going to do what's called a watercolor wash, and you're going to take that water, the clear water, and you're going to wash the background, paint with water between the trees. Try not to get it on the trunk of the trees, but don't worry about it too much. But it's going to be wet, but not sopping so like it just runs off the paper. So you're going to see it's shiny, and you're going to go in between all of these trees. And I've got the video a little bit faster right here, so you won't be going quite that fast. So stop the video at any point in time and get all of that area wet, because we're going to be painting into that and letting it kind of smear and move around, and it's going to wash the background in color. So we're going to add first kind of some yellow in the bottom 2/3 and some green towards the top. So we're going to start with that yellow, get some in there, get some water into our paint. And I mixed just a little bit of water to the other colors to get it ready. A little bit into the green, a little bit into the blue, and a little into the brown. But what we'll be using first is the yellow. And you can see me kind of mixing a little bit in that lid. And we're going to just go down in the bottom part of this and let it just kind of run into that water. It's going to smear. It's going to kind of do whatever it wants to do. I add just a tiny bit of brown too, just to get it a background, a start of color. And I'm going to go all the way across 2/3 of the painting and kind of up towards the top on the right hand side. You'll see me kind of going upwards with that yellow paint. So take your time and get that washed in, add the color. You're not particular about where it goes. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be our background, and then we're going to start adding layers of color on top of this after it's done. We'll add a little bit of green to the top part of the painting. If you can see that green. So we're going to switch over to green in a second, get some more water on my brush. And then pick up a little bit of that green color. See, I'm pointing there to some leaves. But we're going to leave little bits of white in the top there that we're going to be coming back and doing a little bit of blue sky in there. So don't cover everything. See, I'm leaving little bits there of white paper as well. We'll come back and dip a little bit of blue in there, and it's going to smear together with the yellow, and that's okay. That's a watercolor wash. It's coloring a larger part of the paper just with that background color, and it's darker over to the side, so I'm going to be adding in a little bit of that green into the wash. And here's where we're going to start layering up. So I'm adding a little bit of brown, mixing it up in the tray, green and brown, and you can see how it's darker in that corner of the painting. And here we're going to begin layering up our colors. So I'll drop a little bit of green in there, and I'm doing all of this with brush strokes right now. Kind of just using the brush and brushing it into those areas, but not being highly concerned that it stays in a certain spot. It's still kind of blending into the water. I want you to notice that these colors aren't just exactly like the painting. I'm not trying to make it look exactly like the picture. I'm trying to make it look similar, kind of give the effect of this. So I have limited colors in my praying watercolors, so I'm not going to worry if it's perfect, but I am going to seek to dip some colors in and try to make it similar. So I'm picking up some brown, and now I'm going to start adding a little more water to my brush each time, and I'm just going to start dabbing that color in where I see it's darker. And as I dab more, I'm not brushing so much, but from now on I'll be dabbing, kind of just touching the point of my brush into those areas. You can see me kind of just touching the paper with it over and over, and I add a little more water to my brush, pick up a little more paint color, and just keep dabbing. And I'll keep adding layers of color, one on top of the other, but you can see that background wash gives it a background of those colors, except for the little bits of white area that we left for the sky. Okay, so you can see that real dark area in those areas that I'm pointing to. I'm wanting to make those areas darker, so I'm going to get a little paint on my brush. I'm going to go back into the green and mix it a little bit. I'm going to sometimes add brown in again, you'll see, and watch how I dab that, and it kind of looks like leaves or foliage on the trees in the background. So I'm going to keep adding a little bit more green in those darker areas between the trees and down to the right. Even adding a little bit of strokes to the bottom to look like that grass at the bottom of the picture. But most of the time I'm dabbing to make it look more like the leaves. Again, try to stay off of the branch areas. We're going to add different colors to them later, and we want them to stay light. As you can see in the picture, the tree trunks are light. They're not dark brown like we often think of tree trunks being. When we draw or color them, we color them in brown. These are mostly white with a little bit of gray and brown. So we'd like to keep the paint off as much as possible. But if you get a little bit on there, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Think of this as your practice painting the first one, and then you can come back and do a second one and just take the stress off. Don't think it has to be perfect or look just like mine, but do the best that you can to follow my instructions, and you can come back and make another one and try again and think, oh, I'll do this a little differently next time. And that's a fun way to learn. It's not to worry that it has to be perfect. I'm adding a few little leaves onto that twig that's to the left there, and I keep dabbing, and on the bottom sometimes you'll see me making more brush strokes where that grass is towards the bottom, but mostly dabbing to make it look like leaves. And see how it keeps darkening in those certain areas? So just be patient with this and let it layer up. Keep just dabbing color in. Keep looking at the picture now and then so you can see where the darker areas are. Okay, now I'm going to add a little bit of blue into that green to make it look kind of like the shadows. When light is in a picture, it's often in the shadow areas, it has kind of a blue tint to it. So we're going to add in those darker areas some almost blue-green looking paint. And I think that it does pick up those shadow looking areas of the trees. So I'm pointing to some of those, and that's where I'm trying to dab on some of the blue-green color to look like shadows. Take some patience to just dab these colors on like this, because if you start using brush strokes on this, it's not going to look like those leaves, which are individual small dots of color. So just be patient and enjoy trying to layer up these colors. But I really like the way it looks when we put this blue-green on there. I also like how that tray is available for mixing the colors. I don't really even clean mine off very much because I find that the next time when I get that wet, I often use it again in my next painting. I like using those colors. You can see it starting to darken in the background. Dabbing on the paint, leaving those little white spaces still where we're going to put some sky in later on. Again, every once in a while I'm going to be making this go a little bit faster, the video go a little faster, so stop at any time. I'm using a little bit of that blue-green on the bottom also to make some strokes that are supposed to kind of look like the grass on the bottom. And those aren't dots as much as they are little strokes of paint on the bottom. So you'll see me doing that towards the bottom, and that's why. But mostly just dotting on the color. There's a little bit of that grass right there. Going to mix a little brown in to get some more darker shadow as well. Dab that on top of the especially dark spots. So now we actually have three colors mixed there. We have brown, green, and blue. And it just makes kind of a olive looking paint color. We're dabbing that into the darker spots. Not everywhere, just in a few places, and it makes it look like it's darker and darker. It gives it depth, what we call depth, shadows. Putting a little bit of brown actually on that twig to make it look like it's a separate little twig area from the leaves and the grass. Adding a little bit of that brown into the shadows of the very bottom of the painting on the grassy area. So I'm making more strokes down there. Okay, I'm kind of comparing that. Where are the dark spots? Where do I want to add a little bit more? I want a little bit more brown and more shadows to the right-hand side. Few little bits right over there. Yeah, I got a lot darker color there. Adding that brown and the blue. A little bit of green still left in it from where I was mixing. Dotting the color. And I think I'm almost done there. Like the way that looks. Yeah, looking pretty good. Again, it's not exact. I'm just trying to get the main effect of that. Okay, now I'm going to come back with, clean my brush out, get a little bit of water, and I'm going to use the plain blue, and I'm going to paint blue into those areas that were sky before. Just, again, I'm kind of dabbing a little bit of plain blue in there, and that will peek through like the sky is coming through those trees. I'm not brushing again, I'm just kind of dabbing it in, cover up those white spaces. I just left a few of them. I think that was one of my favorite parts of the painting, is when that blue kind of peeked through the branches of the trees. I liked the way that looked. Just looking it over. Anything else I want to do? Always clean your brush well. And I think we're done with the background. Now, you're going to let that dry, because we're going to come back and we're going to do the trunks of the trees. Now, it looks like I'm doing it right away, but I've let the background dry. And the paint will not spread where there isn't water, because we're going to do another watercolor wash, and this time we're going to do it on the tree trunks. So I'm starting over, kind of like we did in the background, but this time on the actual tree trunks, and I'm painting those with water. We're not going to add a lot of color to these trunks, because if you look at them on the picture, they're pretty light colored. So we're going to paint them all with water, and then, well, I'm just going to wait here. Get them all painted. And again, they're going to glisten. You're going to see it, the water shine, but it's not going to puddle up and run. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit of brown right to the edges of the trees. Not a lot. It's very light. There, I'm testing it out to make sure it's light using water, and I'm going to run that brown along the edges of the trees and just let it run into the water that's on the tree trunk. Okay, so it's almost like it's a shadow to the side of the tree trunks. You can see that there's a little more shadow on that back tree. It's a little bit darker than the others because it's back behind, so I painted a little extra there. But most of the brown is just right on the edge of the tree, and then it runs into the water that's on the tree. It's a watercolor wash, but it's not going to be nearly as much color as the background. A little bit of brown on each tree on the edge, and leave the center part really pretty white in color. And then I go in, I'm going to pick up a little bit of that blue, because you remember I said that the shadows and things often look blue with the way the light works. And I'm going to add just a little bit of that blue to the edge of the tree where it's a little bit darker. That back tree is the one that's farthest away from us, and look at the picture, you can see more shadow there. And adding just a little bit of blue, a couple places where I look on the picture and think it has more shadow on the edges of the tree and so forth. And that will make it look like it has dimension or is round. It's not just flat on the paper. We're really just tricking our eyes to think that this flat piece of paper has shape to it. So it's kind of a cool thing if you think about it. And when I'm done with that, I'm going to come back with a little bit of that brown. And if you look at the picture again, you can see that those little knots have a little bit darker color, especially that oval one on the far left tree. And also there's more color on top of those words. Okay, so I feel pretty happy with that on the shadows and the light brown on the trees. How are you doing on yours? Okay, let's look at that knot there. I don't want too much water on my brush, but I'm going to come in with some of that brown around the edge of that knot. You can see it in the picture. It's kind of brown looking. So I'm going to come around the outside edge, add some brown. I'm also going to put a little bit of brown on top of the words and a few of those knots and a few of the lines on the tree. Again, it just makes it look like that tree trunk is round instead of flat. So especially on those knots, the little round circle things that are on the tree, and on top of the words, those had a little bit darker color to them as well. Oh, there's Mom, Sam. Again, I do not think it's right to print on trees, but that's the way a lot of them were, so I did add it into my painting. Have a little bit of brown tint to it. I often stop. If you watch me stop, I'm looking over my painting to think if I want to add anything extra. And I'm using just a tiny bit of blue to add some shadow on a few of those knots and lines on the trees as well. So look at the painting and just kind of have fun. You're experimenting. And that watercolor wash is letting them the colors just kind of blend just a little bit, which is cool. Adding just a little bit of shadow here and there, just to make it interesting looking. So what do you think? I'm pretty close to done there. Actually, just a tiny bit of black I'm going to add to that knot on the tree. Not very much, maybe a little bit here and there on the grasses at the bottom where it's really dark, but I don't use black very much. Just a little bit here and there. I'm kind of liking that. I added just a tiny bit of black in the middle of those little circular knots. I'm going to make a comparison. Again, you see the colors aren't exact, but it gives the effect of those trees. I'm liking that. Clean out my brush and I think I'm done. What do you think? So this easy how to paint aspen trees in watercolor has been a great tutorial. I hope you've learned a lot. The complete written tutorial and things are found over at welcometonanas.com, and I hope you come join me for a lot more projects. See you soon.